My name is Ava Reynolds, and 4 years ago, my parents gave my sister $80,000 to study in Paris. They told me I didn't deserve a single cent, that I wasn't worth helping. I remember the exact way my mother's voice sliced through me that night. Calm, confident, certain, as if she was announcing a fact, not delivering a wound that would take years to heal. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just walked away. That silence, mine, was the only dignity I could afford. I built my life from nothing, one line of code, one paycheck, one lonely night at a time. And last month, when my sister drove past my $5 million house in Medina, she called my father crying, asking why I had that. But what she never understood was this. I have this because they gave me nothing, because they stripped me bare, and I learned how to rebuild myself from the ashes of their indifference. Growing up, there was always a golden one in our family. In ours, it was Leah. She was a year older, born with honey blonde hair and that easy, contagious laugh that made people feel special just being near her. She was the kind of girl people compared others to, the standard, the shining proof that perfection could apparently be achieved. Captain of the cheer squad, homecoming queen, her smile polished enough to blind anyone who dared to look too closely. I was the opposite. I loved machines, not mirrors. I loved the quiet pulse of circuits, the satisfaction of debugging a stubborn line of code. While they filled the bleachers to watch Leah's dance performances, I sat alone in the robotics club basement, surrounded by the low hum of soldering irons and dreams no one else understood. Every family photo told the same story, Leah glowing in the center, me half hidden at the edge, my face cropped out by someone's shoulder. Even at dinner, the spotlight never shifted. Conversations orbited around Leah, her grades, her talent, her plans. When I spoke about software or data, my mother would sigh and say, "Can't you ever talk about something normal?" She said it so often that I began to wonder if normality was the price of love. When I turned 18, my birthday came 2 weeks after Leah received a car. I stood on the porch holding my only gift, a green bus pass and a speech from my father about responsibility. "Take care of yourself, Ava," he said, as if neglect had been rebranded as wisdom. That day, something in me hardened. I realized if I wanted to move forward, it would be with no engine but my own will. College was no different. Leah got help, connections, and funding for her Paris dream. I got a lecture about independence. My mother said, "If you choose to leave, don't expect us to carry your weight." So I didn't. I worked 2 jobs, days at a cafe, nights at an IT help desk, living off instant noodles until I could afford a used laptop. I told myself that this was freedom, even when it felt like exile. But the moment that broke me came at a dinner table in Bellevue. Candles, French roses, the whole display. My father, with his businesslike tone, announced Leah's $80,000 study abroad investment. I remember asking quietly if they could lend me $2,000 to cover my dorm deposit, promising I'd pay it back. My mother's answer came like a blade. "You don't deserve any help." I can still hear the clink of her wine glass as she said it. I'd expected disappointment. I hadn't expected cruelty. That night, I left their house and never went back. Rain poured as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, realizing I'd been erased from my own family's story. I wasn't angry then. Not yet. Anger needs belief. And I didn't believe I mattered enough to hate them. I just felt hollow, like a page torn out of a book no one was reading anyway. Seattle rain has its own rhythm. Thin, persistent, unrelenting. I learned to move through it like armor. I rented a small studio, barely big enough for a bed and a desk, and wrote code until my fingers ached. I wasn't chasing success. I was chasing proof that I existed. Months later, exhaustion sent me to therapy. Dr. Monroe was the first person who didn't dismiss my silence as weakness. She told me I'd grown up under conditional love, affection that evaporated whenever I stopped performing. "You were never loved," she said gently. "You were managed." I sat there stunned because no one had ever named it before. Her words rewired something inside me. I stopped trying to fix the past and started coding my way out of it. The project that became my lifeline was called Pathline. an AI tool to optimize delivery routes and reduce fuel waste. What began as a side experiment became my refuge. When my team lead, Arjun, discovered what I was building, he didn't laugh. He said, "If you refine this, it could change things." And for the first time, someone believed in what I could make, not who I could be. That small validation turned into momentum. We pitched Pathline to the board. It was rough, unpolished, and barely held together, but it worked. And when the founders approved it for internal development, I felt something ignite. Maybe it wasn't love, but it was belief, and belief was oxygen. As Pathline grew, so did I. The more code I wrote, the less room there was for their voices in my head. Each successful model was a quiet act of rebellion against every dinner table that silenced me. 4 years later, Pathline became a multi-million-dollar company, and me, the unwanted daughter, the forgotten one, became its CTO. When I signed the contract for my lakefront home in Medina, I framed my old bus pass and hung it in my office. Beneath it, I engraved a small plaque: "Broken roots, better paths." It was strange how success could feel both heavy and weightless. My house in Medina was beautiful: glass walls, clean lines, overlooking the lake where the light rippled like liquid silver. But at night, when the rain tapped against the glass, I'd sometimes still hear echoes of my mother's voice, that calm certainty saying, "You don't deserve any help." Trauma, I learned, doesn't end when you win. It just changes its form. It hides behind the applause, whispers through the quiet moments between achievements. For a while, peace became my new language. My days were filled with meetings, product launches, and late-night brainstorming sessions with Arjun and our new data engineer, Ethan. He was different from anyone I'd worked with before: quiet, grounded, and completely uninterested in appearances. He never talked about titles or money. He cared about impact. And when he looked at me, it wasn't through the lens of what I'd built, but who I was underneath the precision and control. Sometimes we'd stay after everyone else had gone, running models or debugging lines of code while the city lights shimmered through the glass walls. "You ever wonder why rain feels sad to some people?" he asked one night. I shrugged, my fingers still on the keyboard. "Maybe because it makes everything honest. You can't hide anything in the rain." He smiled, that quiet kind of smile that doesn't demand a reaction. Or maybe it washes things clean. For months, life felt stable, a word that once seemed foreign to me. Then, one afternoon, an old ghost came knocking. Literally, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. And when I answered, a familiar trembling voice filled the line. "Ava, it's me, Leah." I froze. The air seemed to thicken around me. "Leah," her voice cracked. "I just drove past Medina. I saw your name on a gate. Do you really live here?" There it was. The question beneath the tears. Not "How are you?" Not "I've missed you." Just disbelief that I had what she didn't. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." There was a long silence. Then she whispered, half choking, "Why do you have that?" I didn't answer. I hung up before the storm in her voice could reach me. But that one call opened the floodgates. Within an hour, my phone lit up with messages from my parents, my aunt, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. The same people who had once made me feel invisible now suddenly remembered my name. My mother's voicemail was the same polished tone she used at dinner parties. "Ava, darling, we just heard about your success. Your sister's been very emotional. She's expecting a baby, you know. It's time we heal and come together as a family." Then my father's voice, measured and transactional. "Call us back. We need to talk as a family." That word again. Family. They used it like a key to a house I no longer lived in. Days passed, and the calls multiplied. Then came a letter, my mother's handwriting, neat and deliberate. The envelope smelled faintly of perfume, like nostalgia wrapped in manipulation. It began sweetly. "Ava, I'm not writing to argue. We've all made mistakes. Leah's pregnant now, and your father's been under a lot of stress. The roof needs replacing, and things have been difficult. We're happy for your success, truly. But remember, family helps family." Then came the line that made my stomach twist. Success is meant to be shared. I trust you're not a cold-hearted person. I stared at those words until they blurred. They hadn't changed at all. They still saw me as a resource, a means to maintain their image. I wasn't a daughter. I was a line item. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt tired. I picked up my therapy journal, the one Dr. Monroe had told me to keep, and wrote a single sentence. They don't miss me. They miss what I can give them. Ethan found me later, standing by the window. They reached out again. He said softly, "Yeah," I whispered. "Now they need me." He nodded slowly. "They don't realize you already learned how to live without them." The next morning, I sat at my desk and began writing 2 letters, one to my mother, one to my father, not to seek closure, but to define it. To my mother, I wrote, "You believe you're reaching out to mend things? But what you call healing is just another way of returning to the old pattern, where I carry everyone's weight but my own. I can't go back there. I don't blame you anymore, but I need peace. And peace requires distance." Then I listed the moments. The bus pass, the missing graduation, the night she told me I didn't deserve help. I ended it with boundaries. No money talk, no unannounced visits, no guilt. To my father, I wrote, "You once said investments must bring returns. But love isn't a transaction. I'm not a stock, and I don't owe you dividends. If you want closure, meet me at the Fremont Cafe on Thursday at 10. When I sealed those letters, my hands trembled. Not from fear, but release. I mailed them the next morning. I didn't expect apologies. I just wanted silence. The Fremont Cafe was almost empty that Thursday morning. Light poured through the tall glass windows, painting the wooden tables in soft gold. I got there early, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window where the reflection of the river shimmered faintly beyond the bridge. My stomach felt hollow, but my hands were steady. I'd spent years waiting for acknowledgement, for someone to finally admit the cruelty behind their choices. Now I realized I didn't need it. I just needed to be heard, once, without begging to be seen. When my father walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. His posture was still upright, but his eyes had dulled. Less fire, more fatigue. He spotted me, hesitated, then approached with that same polite, businesslike composure I'd seen 1,000 times. "Ava," he said, removing his coat and hat. "You look different." I met his gaze. "Better or worse?" He gave a thin, uneasy smile. "Different is fine." The waitress came and took his order. For a moment, silence sat between us. Not hostile but heavy. Then he sighed, looking down at his coffee. "Your mother might have gone too far. You know how she is. Always emotional, always worried about appearances." I let out a quiet laugh. "That's the story I grew up on, isn't it? You know how she is." The excuse that covers every wound she ever left. He frowned, his voice defensive. "She didn't mean to hurt you. Ava, if someone stabs you," I said softly, "you don't excuse it because they didn't mean to. A wound is still a wound." He didn't respond. He just turned the coffee cup slowly between his palms, the sound of ceramic scraping wood cutting through the still air. "Finally," he said, "I just want things to be peaceful." "We're still family?" I nodded slightly. Family can't be peaceful if one side has to bleed for the other to stay comfortable. His jaw tightened. "Do you really believe your mother and I did nothing for you? We raised you, fed you, educated you." I looked him in the eye, and I'm grateful for that. But I also remember what came after. The tuition loans, the rent, the nights I worked double shifts just to keep a roof over my head. I built everything I have without your help. "That's not anger, Dad. It's reality." He said nothing for a long while. Then, in a low, almost resigned voice, he murmured, "Your mother wanted to send Leah to Paris to save face. The relatives, her friends, they all bragged about their children studying abroad. She couldn't bear the comparison. The 80,000 wasn't really about Leah. It was about pride." I stared at him. In that moment, all the missing pieces snapped together. Every cruel word, every dismissal, every time they chose image over truth. It all made sense. They didn't just play favorites. They performed love for an audience. Pride, I said quietly, is what people cling to when they've already lost their self-respect. He looked down, shoulders sagging under the weight of something he'd never named before. Regret. Maybe you're right. I finished my coffee and stood up, placing a few bills on the table. I don't blame you. Dad, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean reopening old wounds. It means closing them for good. He looked up, startled. You forgive me? Yes, I said softly. Not for you, for me. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, the sky the color of wet steel. I crossed the bridge, the wind slicing through my coat. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow. I felt light. The past didn't vanish, but it no longer defined the air I breathed. I had closure, not from them, but from myself. A week later came the moment I never planned for: the annual City Innovation Gala, a celebration of sustainability and technology. Sponsored partly by Pathline, the event was grand. Gold lights, polished marble floors, and people in gowns and tuxedos whispering about whose project would win this year's award. I didn't expect to see them there, but fate never asks for permission. Halfway through the evening, I heard that familiar voice, soft but sharp enough to cut glass. Ava, darling. I turned, and there she was, my mother, Ava Reynolds, draped in navy silk, Leah beside her in a pale blue dress, her stomach rounded with pregnancy. For a second, it felt like a flashback, like I was 18 again, standing under the same spotlight I never asked for. We came to congratulate you, she said brightly, her smile rehearsed. Your father couldn't make it, but we wanted to be part of your big night. She leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate yet commanding. You've done so many wonderful things. And of course, family should help family. Leah's preparing for the baby, and your father still needs that roof repaired. A little support would show everyone you haven't forgotten where you came from. Her words sliced neatly through the noise around us. People nearby turned their heads, pretending not to listen but failing miserably. My mother knew exactly what she was doing, weaponizing the room, using public pressure as leverage. If I refused, I'd look heartless. If I agreed, I'd step right back into the cage I'd escaped. For a heartbeat, I saw my younger self reflected in the glass wall, the girl with tangled hair and tired eyes, begging for fairness. Then I smiled, calm and deliberate. You're right, Mom, I said softly. It's time I give back. Her face lit up, but before she could speak, I gestured to one of the event staff who stepped forward, holding a pearl-white envelope. I walked toward the stage, where the host had just announced the next donation round, scholarships for young women in STEM. Taking the microphone, I said clearly, tonight, I'd like to contribute $80,000 to the city's science scholarship fund. For every girl who was ever told she didn't deserve help. The room fell silent. Then applause erupted, waves of it. I glanced toward my mother and sister. Elaine's smile cracked, her painted face stiffening into disbelief. Leah stared at the floor, one hand clutching her belly. I leaned in slightly, my voice soft but precise. You used to call it an investment. Mom, so do I. The only difference is, I invested in the right people. The applause rippled through the grand hall like a storm breaking open, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breath, steady, calm, liberated. People clapped and cheered as the giant check appeared on screen. $80,000. To every girl who was told she doesn't deserve help. The same number that once measured my worthlessness now became proof that they no longer held power over me. I stepped down from the stage and walked straight toward their table. My mother's hands were trembling as she tried to recompose her smile, her voice catching somewhere between pride and panic. Leah's eyes glistened, but I could tell the tears weren't for me. They were for the mirror she could no longer recognize. The one that used to reflect superiority, but now showed the truth of what privilege built on cruelty looks like. When I reached them, I leaned down so only they could hear me. You used to call it an investment, I said softly. So do I. The only difference is that I invested in something that actually matters. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. For once, She had no script, no defense. Leah looked at me with a mix of shame and disbelief. "Ava," she whispered, "you didn't have to." I stopped her with a small smile. "No, Leah, I did. Because this time, I get to decide what help means." When I turned away, I caught sight of my father standing near the entrance. His eyes locked on the screen where that number still glowed in white light. 80,000. I saw realization wash over him. He knew exactly what that number meant. And what I'd done? His expression was unreadable. A man seeing the cost of his choices displayed for the entire city to applaud. He didn't approach me, and I didn't go to him. Some distances don't need closing. After the gala, I walked outside into the cool Seattle night. Rain had begun to fall, soft and rhythmic, the way it always did when something in me was about to shift. Ethan was waiting by the curb, his jacket slightly damp, a quiet pride glowing in his eyes. "You just changed the definition of justice," he said, his voice low and steady. I smiled faintly. "No," I whispered. "I just reminded them what real investment looks like." We stood there for a long time, the rain misting against our skin. It didn't sting anymore. It felt clean, like the city itself was washing away what was left of my pain. I thought of the younger version of me, the girl holding a bus pass while everyone else held keys. The girl who sat alone in that basement lab wondering if she'd ever be seen. She wouldn't have believed that one day she'd stand beneath city lights, free from needing anyone's permission to exist. In the weeks that followed, the calls stopped, the messages disappeared. Silence, at last, became my inheritance. Not empty, not cruel, but peaceful. I didn't block them this time. I just let time do what I never could, draw the line for me. It was strange, how love can decay into obligation, and how obligation can rot into nothing at all. I had once mistaken forgiveness for reconciliation. Now I understood it was simply release, the act of unclenching what never belonged to you in the first place. By June, Ethan and I hosted a small engagement gathering by the lakeshore, nothing extravagant, just close friends, Arjun, Zoe, and Dr. Monroe, who stood quietly at the back with that knowing smile that said, "You made it." The air smelled like cedar and summer. Laughter drifted across the water, and for the first time, it didn't echo against any emptiness inside me. When Arjun raised his glass, he said, "To Ava, proof that resilience is the most brilliant form of revenge." Everyone laughed, but I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I sat in my office. The same office that once felt too big for one person now felt just right. I opened my old journal, the one Dr. Monroe told me to write in when I couldn't sleep, and began to write the last letter I would never send. "I no longer need you to see me. I am the one who sees myself now. I have walked through silence, through doubt, through hunger and rain. And every time I thought I was breaking, I was really just becoming." I closed the journal, stood, and looked out over Lake Washington. The waters shimmered beneath the moonlight like a mirror. Still, calm, certain. On the wall beside me hung that framed green bus pass, the same one that once symbolized humiliation. Beneath it, the metal plaque read, "Broken roots, better paths." I smiled at the reflection of that phrase, then at the faint image of the girl I used to be, her messy hair, her secondhand hoodie, her quiet hope. "They once told me I didn't deserve help," I whispered. They were right. I never deserved conditional love. I deserved better. And this time, I gave it to myself. Thank you for listening. If you believe that sometimes the greatest vengeance is peace, make sure to subscribe to Vengeance Within, where stories of survival become strength and pain turns into purpose.